It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Jake Iggy from Iggy Sports Talk. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Brandon?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you got started with your Sports Talk podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, for my first 2 years studying in college at Plymouth State University, I was a business major. And when I was going into my junior year, I sort of was evaluating what sort of jobs I would be interested in after I was graduating. And I noticed all the jobs in business and sales that I had been really shooting for my first 2 years, I wasn't really passionate about that. And I talked to my advisor, and he sort of asked me, so what things are you most interested in? And the one thing that I kept on bringing up was sports. And he said, well, have you ever thought about working in sports or talking about sports for a living? And it was something where throughout my life, I've always had a huge interest in talking about sports and potentially being a sports reporter, but I've always had doubters tell me, you're not going to be able to make a lot of money, or it's a very competitive field, or it's something where it should just be a hobby and it's tough to actually make it a job. And so I said, I'm not going to listen to any of the doubters. I'm going to do what I love. You only have one life, and I'm going to pursue my passion. And so I was very anxious when I actually did switch my major going into my junior year, because I only had 2 more years before I graduated, and everybody else, at least in my major at my school, had been studying this stuff for the last 2-3 years. And so I needed to find a way to differentiate myself while also being able to gain experience. And so that's when I started Iggy Sports Talk around a year ago. I think it's August 25th. When I actually started the Instagram page, and I started just mainly posting just sports updates and videos, and then started getting more into blogs. And then around 4 months into me starting Iggy Sports Talk, that's when I started the podcast. And it's something that I've tried to do weekly and as much as I can. And I've had a really good time being able to, live my dream of not only being able to talk to sports, but not only being able to talk about sports, but also being able to talk to sports professionals, professional sports players, and just being able to do stuff that I've always dreamed of being able to do since I was a little kid.
Can you talk about how you came up with the name Iggy Sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So my last name is actually Ignazuski, so it's 11 letters long. And anytime I would really be in any sort of class, or even in an environment when I would introduce myself, people would have no clue really either how to say my last name, how to spell it. And so growing up, I would always call my grandparents, grandma and grandpa, Iggy. And Iggy was sort of kind of like an abbreviation of my super duper long last name, Ignazuski. And so I decided, why not make it into the brand of myself and try and use it to promote my love of sports.
Can you talk about being on your radio station for your sports podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a part of the radio station at my school in Plymouth State University, and most of the time, the most kids just use it. So what I'm content, bring on different guests and like that sort of stuff. And it's something where it's kind of cool, obviously, to be on a radio show, knowing that people are listening to you in your radio, and also being able to repurpose it as a podcast as well. And it was a pretty surreal moment, quite honestly, when one of my good friends actually sent me a video, and he was listening to my radio show on the radio. And it was just sort of a moment where I was like, wow, I'm actually able to like do something I love and actually be on the radio. So it was pretty cool.
Can you talk about some of the people that you've interviewed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've gotten the chance to interview some pretty cool reporters, former players as well. to highlight some of the reporters: Bob Nightingale from USA Today, Steve Perrault from Section 10 Red Sox podcast, as well as a few professional sports players, such as I just had a guy named Brandon McGee actually on my radio show yesterday, who he was the last person other than Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders who played in the MLB and in the NFL, both at the same exact time. I've also gotten the chance to interview Darnell McDonald, former Red Sox player, Lars Anderson, former Red Sox player, Elliot Johnson, and I've just really tried my best to get a few different players and reporters from different parts of the world, as well as different people who I know have different experiences, because I know that they probably have stories that people have never really heard of, and I try to ask them different questions to be able to get the chance to hear those different kinds of stories.
Can you talk about how you went about getting some of the people that you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been at the start, it was kind of a struggle because I saw a lot of people being able to get these really cool guests and all that sort of stuff. And so I had to figure out the best way to not only reach out to these people, but find these people's contact information. It's actually not as hard as you think, because with the world that we live in right now with social media, it's really as easy as just following the person, messaging them, hoping that they DM you back. Or you can also just comment as well and sort of say something intriguing that might potentially get them to reply, or also look at your direct message that you sent. Also, what I usually like to do is do my best to see if they have an email in their Instagram account or their Twitter account, and I've gotten some success from that as well. But the biggest success, quite honestly, has been LinkedIn, because most of the time, all I really have to do is just connect with the person and add a note that I'm an aspiring sports podcaster, sports reporter, and I would love to get the opportunity to talk to them for 10 to 15 minutes. And most of the time, they're very willing to come on, especially since not a lot of people hit them up over LinkedIn. Or you're going to get rejected. Sometimes you're going to get approved. Sometimes there's going to be weeks where you don't hear from people for like 2 weeks. And then there's sometimes where you have like 5 people respond to you. So it's hit or miss, but you just got to crank out the emails and the calls and just hope for the best.
Have you interviewed any college coaches?
I unfortunately have not.
What are some of your future plans for Iggy Sports Talk?
So some of my future plans for Iggy Sports Talk at the moment is obviously just continuing to produce content as much as I can through all the major social platforms that I post on. I usually try to post every single day on Instagram and TikTok. Twitter, I usually do tweets during live games, or if something comes up to my head, I just tweet it. But mainly my main goal right now is, because I'm a senior in college at the moment, and I'm mainly focusing on just graduating and doing the best I can to be able to find a job after college. I'm just continuing trying to use Iggy Sports Talk as a way to get experience, but also use it as a way to build my network and gain connections. Who knows what could happen with Iggy Sports Talk after I graduate college? You know what I mean? Who knows if I get picked up from a network? Who knows what happens? So I just kind of go with the same saying every single day. Everything happens for a reason. So I'm just kind of going with the flow.
What have you learned now that you didn't know beforehand? What did you learn that you didn't know beforehand starting Iggy Sports Talk?
So some things I learned was just some mostly outreach, research, as well as editing and like social media marketing. So I'm going to start off with like the outreach and like the research. So like the outreach is mainly what I talked about a little bit earlier, with just reaching out to different reporters, professional players, or even just aspiring content creators or interesting people that I can talk to. figuring out like the messaging and the ways to find those people, I definitely had to learn. Another thing as well was the researching. So just trying to figure out the best sites to be able to research different people and to find interesting, unique things that not a lot of people really know about these different professional players, to bring up interesting topics. And then also just like social media marketing as well. That's one of the biggest things that I had to learn, is how to attract people on my Instagram, TikTok, and all the other major social platforms that I post on. Because I kind of had the mindset of, if I'm going to continue this.
What advice would you give upcoming future sports talk podcasts looking to get started just like you did?
So the first thing that I would say is be yourself, because when people usually start a sports podcast or just any podcast in general, they usually try to replicate something or people that they usually watch. And that's great. Use the techniques that you like from the people that you watch, but try to make it yourself. Try to act like yourself and make it your own, because people are going to believe you a lot more. It's going to be a lot more entertaining as well. Another thing as well is make sure that what you're talking about, that you're passionate about. If you're forced to talk about basketball for some reason and you're more into baseball, stay with what you're comfortable with. And then mostly just have fun with it, because podcast is really all about just like meeting new people, as well as just talking about things that you love to do. So if you're not getting the views that you're really hoping for, focus on just having fun with the podcast, just enjoying what you're doing. Take the numbers out of it. It seems like now with the social media world that we live in, all people really care about is likes, views, and comments. So just enjoy what you're doing. Don't really care about the trajectory of how fast you're growing. That will come. But if you're trying to do it for a job, obviously try to focus on that a little bit. But like I said, just be passionate about it, be yourself, and do it to have fun.
Where can my listeners find Iggy Sports Talk at on social media along with podcast platforms?
So people can find Iggy Sports Talk on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and all the major social platforms. And Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I usually promote it or announce that I posted it on all my major platforms, but mostly Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Thank you again, Jake, for your interview, and best of luck with Iggy Sports Talk.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Jake, for your interview, and best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.